Hi, this is Shadi, and this is arguably one of the most requested video on this channel, and that is to discuss the different styles of judo according to countries and what distinguishes each style, whether it is Eastern like Russian, Mongolian, Japanese, or Western like French, Brazilian, etc. I gathered some footage of one of the most popular countries competing on the IJF World Tour, like Georgia, Korea, Japan, Russia, and we're gonna see what distinguishes each style and see truly the difference, and maybe have a civil discussion in the comments down below. So let's begin. So the first style that we're going to be looking at is obviously Japan. Japan is where judo was born, and the quick thing that you can notice in all of the Japanese judokas, whatever the category, male, female, lightweight, heavyweight, is that they're very quick, they're very swift, and it comes from out of nowhere, yet it is very simple, but there's so much intricacies to whatever they are doing. For example, their kumikata. Their kumikata is basically the sleeve and the lapel, but it can be very versatile. They can just let go. They can just, if they cannot get the lapel, they can do it double sleeve. They can just have one lapel and attack it. But it really depends on what's going on the fight. But in short, it is sleeve and lapel, and once they get that grip, it is game over. They go down, no strength, all leverage, all momentum, and this is how they wanted it. They want it mind over muscle. They want it very quick, fluid, aesthetic, and effortless throwing. You can say Uta Abe and Hifumi Abe are a bit of a, how do you say, something not normal to the rule. They are like an exception where they kind of force the ippon, but everything from Inoue in the -100, from Maruyama in -66, even Ono and Hashimoto, who are very strongly built. Look at this one. They just effortlessly roll and get that Sodetsuri Komigoshi or Uchimata in the case of Ono. But other than that, it is fluid, it is quick, swift, and no strength needed. The kumikata is their way of just getting that connection. It's not something that they just use to really push down their opponent, break their spirit, break their posture, kind of like the Russians or the French. It's just a grip that they just need in order to do kuzushi, tsukuri, and kake. Very basic, yet very magical in the least. So this is mainly Japanese judo, effortless. I've talked about it in my judoka profile, the kumikata, everything from Uchimatas when I'm analyzing Maruyama or other Japanese judokas, even Inoue in the -100 and the +100, his Uchimata remained very effortless and just using leverage and momentum. I've discussed this many times. So in short, Japanese judo is effortless, there's no use of strength at all, and it's very technical, using leverage and positioning rather than power or speed. The second style that I want to discuss is the Korean judo. Now, some people from first observation, they might think that Korean and Japanese, they might be a bit similar. However, from my observations and personal experience sparring with Japanese at the Institute of Judo in Paris. If you don't know what Institute of Judo is, it's like the biggest dojo in France, and it basically hosts championships, and also after Paris Grand Slam all the competitors, they go there, they have like a small seminar between each other. So it's a very big deal to go and train there. And from what I've learned and what I've seen in competition is that the Japanese are they wait for timing and good positioning rather than speed. So for example, Ono, Hashimoto, Maruyama, they might seem a lot of the times like kind of passive almost, but when they get that grip they want, they have that opening they want, that ippon is almost inevitable. A bit different from Abe siblings, as I mentioned, but this is how most of them operate, even the heavier ones like Kokoro Kagera, who beat Teddy Rene. But Korean Judo is all about that speed and lightness and just dropping and exploding into Seoinage, reverse Seoinage, which dubbed Korean Seoinage, and also the drop Tayotoshi. So if I had to do like an analogy of the two styles, it's the Japanese Judo is the calm before the storm, and then the crushing wind that blows the ship into pieces. But Korean Judo is that thunder in the storm. Again, it's all about that quickness, lightness, element of surprise. They go for quickness. During randori, they're always moving constantly. The Japanese, they are a bit calm while they're gripping, etc. But once they see that opening, bam, they attack. But the Koreans, they're just going at it quickly and with lightness, no force, no strength. And they do have a distinct style of explosive techniques, the drop Seoinage, the drop Tayotoshi, and their Ashiwaza as well, very similar to Japanese Judo. So in short, they look for that quickness, lightness, while the Japanese tend to look more for that positioning and the opening before executing the throw and go for the ippon. The next style that I want to discuss is also an Eastern style, and that is Mongolian Judo. If I had one word to say about Mongolian Judo, that is one word: unorthodox. Why? If you don't know a bit about Mongolia has deep-rooted in its culture wrestling called boch, and it is a jacket form of wrestling. So they do have some grips, and they do tend to take them into Judo. They're kind of like an armpit shoulder grip, like an underhook, overhook type of grip, and it can be applied to the Judo-gi very easily. And this is where you see most of these attacks, like for example here, this one, sometimes they tend to go for the belt. So the gripping, the kumikata or grip fighting is very unorthodox, very it can be very surprising to the opponent. This is what I can say. When it comes to executing a technique, it is not incredibly elegant like the Japanese or the Korean. There is some form of strength. They use like a strong judo. One of the techniques that they do shine in is the Yagura Nage, or now simply known as the front Uchimata. So it's kind of like you're hugging someone and you put the foot in front between the legs and lift up and go lift for the ippon. Here, this is the Yagura Nage, kind of like a front suplex, but using your knee to reap the inner thigh. This is why it's called front Uchimata. You're reaping the thigh, but from the front, you're not turning your back. Again, the distinction of the style is the gripping in particular. They do tend to bring the boch style wrestling into Judo, like Dash Dava, for example, or Ganbatar as well. They are also known for using strength. They're not very elegant like the Japanese and the Korean, as I have mentioned. And the next style is Russian Judo. I realized that the further I go west, the more strength is being used, and it's far more reflecting the people. They are strong, like mountainous regions. They tend to be just sheer brute strength and just tanks going through the competition. very strong with their grips, very strong with their particularly uranage and hip throws. Even women, they use their small stature to load their opponent on their hips and just go in. Here you can see the less elegant judo in their gripping and also in their execution of the ippon. Russian people are strong, they use strength when it comes to judo. Their gripping is also unorthodox. They get the ippon from almost any grip, sleeve lapel, double lapel, double sleeve, but mainly if they get both hands, that ippon is inevitable. They will just tank through it and just drive like with an uranage. They're not afraid to use strength, they're not afraid to use leverage, and it's also very reflective of the wrestling aspect of the Russian people. So they're not afraid to wrestle, they're not just in there calm and waiting for that opening for the ippon, or they're just using timing, quickness and positioning in order to get the ippon like the Koreans. They're just out there crushing it. Many examples like Mudranov, the Olympic champion, Mansour Isayev, also an Olympic champion, Abdul Zalilov, they all use that explosive strength and like really tight gripping and execute, whether it is ashiwaza or uranage. They sacrifice themselves in order to get it. For example, an ochigari, they tend to fall with them, really hugging them and just going for that bear hug and going down, taking their opponent with them. Like they have that, I'm going down and I'm taking everything down with me, and it really shows in the uranage and the uchimata they do. For example, like I said, Mudranov and Isayev are very good example of Russian judo. The next style that's gonna be discussed is Georgian judo. I find it a bit similar to Russian, after all they're neighbors, and also it reflects the type of people they are, like strong and determined, and they grew up in these mountainous area and their region hasn't been very stable in the, for example, last century, and it shows in their judo. Very different from the minimalist, calm Japanese way of thinking. I find Georgian judo less elegant than say Russian judo. This is not like a bad thing. They just grind through that ippon. One brilliant example is Gviniashvili with his kataguruma, uranage and ogoshi. He does those very brilliantly and just piles drives his opponent down and just gets the ippon. Someone, if you see the build of Gviniashvili, he's not particularly very tall. I think he's like 5'11" or 180 centimeters. Look at this uranage, just monstrous strength being used in order to get the ippon. Gviniashvili, very well built, very muscular, very strong, and he's using that strength for his advantage in competition, and it's working out very well. Georgian judo, like I said, very similar to Russian judo, but they just hammer through the opponent. Gripping wise, it's sometimes when it comes to countering, they just go for like a bear hug and they just execute the ippon, or they just get like a high Russian arm grip and go again for the ippon if they are, say, dominating the match. But if someone is like felt they are dominating and they have like a high grip and they go for an ippon, the Georgian counters with like a bear hug. Georgians and the Russians are very good with bear hugs, Mongolians as well, from the grip of the Boch wrestling. So like I said, all this area that's close with Russia, Mongolia, Georgia and Russia itself, they are very good with bear hugs and unorthodox grip fighting, different from the Koreans and the Japanese, say. So again, Georgian judo and Russian judo very similar, but Georgian Judo tends to hammer through the technique far more bit strongly than the Russians, from my observations at least. And now let's go farther west and go to France. France is a leading country in Judo when it comes to Western Europe. You can argue you have some in Germany, Sweden, etc. But France truly shines on the IJF World Tour or the IJF stage. Multiple world champions, multiple Olympic champions. So it's only fair to discuss their style of Judo. Now, I live in France, I practice Judo in France, and I've been to seminars and open mats ran by a high-level judokas, 6th, 7th dan. And the thing that I've noticed the most is even in the heavy categories, Teddy Rene, Alex Edir, Hugo Legrand in 73, they all tend to have one thing in common, and that is break down your enemy through grip fighting. Once they lose their grip, they lose their control of the fight, they lose their posture, they even lose their mentality. That's when you strike, and they strike very efficiently, quickly, very little strength used, and that's how the French use their Judo. Like even high Russian arm is very popular in France, even among the amateurs. Teddy Rene destroys his enemy's posture or opponent's posture and like mentality with his high Russian arm and using his height to do that. But so when it comes to grip fighting, it is kind of classical but also very strong. But throwing is very much Korean style throwing, very quick, very swift, and not much strength used, unlike Russia, Georgia, and Mongolia. For example, I'll give you an example of how when you dominate the grip and you frustrate your opponent to the point where they just lose without even knowing. Daria Bilodid against Melanie Clément in Tbilisi in the finals. Melanie Clément really knew how to just destroy Daria's gripping abilities. She just held on to that left sleeve of Daria, knowing she is left-handed, and she just couldn't do anything. She was just standing there and with her hands in front of her and just not doing anything. And then Melanie Clément caught her with that Osoto Otoshi and controlling the fight psychologically and technically. And when I say psychologically, I really mean it. We all saw how Daria cried on that podium and after the match. Teddy Rene, listen, look, dominating the grip. The Mongolian barely had, the Korean, I'm sorry, barely had any like control of the grip, and just that Uchimata came in. Again, they just bring down their opponent mentally and physically with that gripping, sheer gripping, breaking posture. It doesn't seem very apparent, but it's very much there. Not necessarily a very high Russian arm, just on the back of the neck and grabbing the sleeve, really controlling the sleeve and controlling the neck. That would really assist in breaking your opponent's posture and heading for that ippon. It's very subtle, but it is there. The control of the posture and grips really contributes to their judo. For example, in Japan, you might think you are very dominant, or you have like a dominant grip, but then they just get you down with that ippon. They very much surprise you. Kokoro Kagera does it in the plus 100 all the time. They think they have this dominant grip, but he just sweeps them or does whatever. Similar with Ono, he was going for several techniques against Basile. I'm sorry, Basile was going through several techniques against Ono. He had the grip he wanted and everything, but Ono wouldn't move. He had the illusion that he's in control, but he was just basically defenseless, and Ono caught him in the right time with that Uchimata Geishi. The French, if they don't have the grip they wanted, or they don't control the gripping, the grip fighting, then they are truly losing. But the Japanese is not always the case, or the Georgians or the Russians. And the final style that I want to discuss is the Brazilian style of Judo, and this is not based on my observation. This is based on Neil Adams' observation, and the Brazilians have a truly magical style of Judo, particularly when transitioning to Newaza. He talked about Shibana, Silva. They just, one moment they're standing there, they're grip fighting, and with a blink of an eye they're on the ground with a flying choke or a flying armbar. Flavio Canto is an excellent example of this. He truly shined doing this. Shibana as well. I believe Silva tapped out Kaori Matsumoto in this manner. The Brazilian style is very swift, very magical, very beautiful and effortless. That style is not only good in Judo, but also if you take it to BJJ competitions, that can work very well. I really like this aspect in the Brazilians. I think flying techniques should be practiced more. They're very magical. That's all I can say, is it's very magical. So this is based on my observation and the general opinion of these styles, whether it is Eastern or Western. If you have anything else to add, anything else that I have missed, maybe share it down below. I would love if you contribute further to the conversation. I had a pleasure doing this video because it has been requested for a long time, and again, if you have anything else to add, the comment section is wide open. Like this video if you found it informative. This was Shadi, and thank you for listening.